All right, we've got a special segment here. We're going to be bringing to you a presentation that was done during the student program of ATSNJ 2023. Christopher Meny is the business development manager for sports for Kessler Rehabilitation. And Chris gave a really great presentation, just focusing not just on concussion rehabilitation, but everything that those future athletic trainers need to be thinking about when it comes to developing their care approach and the things that drive the way they go about caring for these injuries. So Chris, thanks for taking some time to do a little recap on your session. The first thing that you started out your session with was you took some time to focus on a lesson to help the students think about something that will develop their approach to care. Can you just speak to that a little bit and give us some thoughts on what you share with them?
Yeah, so I basically started my talk with using the term young professionals. I think we all agree that we're all still students and still trying to learn. And I tried to reinforce that, they might be graduating, but they're still going to continue to learn and get better. And that was my goal there today, was just to start the conversation around rehabilitation and concussions and give some tools that they'll be able to use in the future to start to put that together. So what I had them do was I broke down the concussion into several different ways, and as they're going through their evaluation, trying to figure out what the meanings were. If it was a visual impairment, if it was a hearing issue, if it was emotional, and then I gave them some techniques. So I started out the conversation with them either scrolling through their phones or identifying the people in their lives who had allowed them to be in that room today, who had a positive effect, who mentored them, who had some significant history with them, and I asked them to write those names down on a piece of paper. And then we started to talk a little bit more about the graded symptom scale and what those things mean, and we broke down the injury itself and we got away from the shin splints model, right? We started digging into if it's an eye issue, why is it an eye issue, right? The eye is basically suspended within a socket by 6 muscles, 8 muscles, and a ring that holds it in there. So is it the eye muscles and the nerves that innervate those muscles that are changing the motor skills? Is it the optic nerve that was stretched? Where was it stretched? Rather than just it was a brain injury and we need to move on from that. And then we talked about the inner ear and how that's just basically another appendage that's sitting in a chasm and is just floating around and can easily just get slammed in a roll of inflammation, and how that would turn. And then the on the emotional part in vagus nerve, we talked a little bit more about that as well. So I continued down the path of trying to define those things and giving them different tools in their assessment process.
Yeah, and that really speaks to those different factors that come into play that guide the return to play, they guide our care. What's sort of some things, you kind of went into it already a little bit, but really key takeaways. What are some the biggest factors you've seen in your career and also in this research and putting this presentation together that really influence that outcome post concussion, with like which factors are determining which direction you go with that care?
So if we go back to that model and we use symptom based, we're moving closer and closer to having sideline blood tests
Hmm.
for the protein degeneration that occurs during a concussion that is a brain protein injury, right? But we
Hmm.
have to be prepared to say, okay, but these symptoms don't match. They're considered a concussion symptom, but we don't see the protein damage that goes along with the blood test. So how do we
Hmm.
act at that point? So that was part of where I was going with it. And as far as the vagus nerve resolution, too many people out there are saying their rehabilitation is complete when resolution of symptoms have occurred and their 7 days, they went through the 7-step return to play. And we know that the re-injury rates are significantly higher for lower extremity after a concussion, and the re-injury rate of concussion itself is significantly higher. So we dove into neuroplasticity a little bit and how motor neurons learn from each other and how that original prior to the injury, if you're talking about a high school athlete, that person has learned how to do what they were doing for 17 or 18 years. And now there's a new pathway that's been formed, or the neuroplasticity and a new nerve generated, a new communication system is done that's had less than 6 months to catch up with what it took 17 years to build already. And so I tried to drive home those different pieces and how, there's different individuals, specialists that are going to help us along the way. If it's vision, maybe it's an optometrist, maybe it's an ophthalmologist. If it's hearing and balance, there are specific tests, whether it's inner ear, outer ear, and then how we can leverage those relationships for those pieces of expertise to get the full return to play.
And when you're looking at all those pieces, it's really awesome that you spoke to that aspect of neuroplasticity. I've seen some of that data as well, and just the post concussion injury rates going up. And also, I think we all know that too. We should know that just because there's certain symptoms doesn't mean it's actually from the concussion. It could be from something else as well. So as you're going through all this in your care approach, Chris, let's say you suspect there's a vagus nerve involvement, or you need to work with that. Let's say there's a neuroplasticity component to it that you want to address, or an oculomotor or a vestibular. What's some advice you have in terms of guiding your rehab approach when it comes to these kind of findings if they're showing up?
So we'll use vagus nerve as an example, right? A lot of people will look at heart rate as a determining factor when the better predictor on the return is heart rate variability. Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to define and speak to those two things and educate other people that, hey, there's a better way to do this, or we need to take a look at this other set of information before we say, yes, you're cleared to return. Mm-hmm. And starting that conversation and then giving some tools, like, so the drill that I did where the exercise that I did where they named the name and then they came up with the trait is actually a great grounding exercise that helps reset the emotional side that involves the vagus nerve. So that was one of the tools. And so you can journal, the other example I gave was have them gargle, because the vibrations from the gargling actually same as Om and same as the meditation, it vibrates the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve. So it kind of makes sense that it may take the longest to recover if it was a nerve injury. So that was as far as vagus nerve. We talked about adding Fukuda step test into their evaluation, just as another skill set to take another look at inner ear, to show them a trigger on that. And then last but not least, I gave everybody that was in the audience a Brock string, so they could work on some conversion skills, get to know how that works, and whether they use it in the rehab process itself or as an evaluation tool. It's just another way to check the eyes. So
that's fantastic, and hopefully, based on what you just shared, this will create some curiosity amongst the listeners to go out and look into some of those things further, to do a little research. Your contact information is in the show notes as well, Chris. So that way anyone can reach out to you if they want to learn more or pick your brain, or if they have questions about what you had in that presentation and what you mentioned today. But thank you so much for taking some time to debrief with us, and continue to do the great things that you're doing. Really appreciate what you're doing for our profession.
I appreciate it, Ryan. Talk soon.
All right. Have a great night.